Welcome to Come Rain or Shine with Dan Cockerell. This is the show where we explore the power of leadership and culture on your organization's success. I'm your host, Jody Mayberry, and I'm here with Dan Cockerell. He is in Colorado. I'm in Washington State, but we did just have a fabulous trip together. Unlike any trip we've done, Dan and I have done business trips together, but this one was a recreating trip, a hiking trip. And Dan has now learned if you're going to hike with a park ranger, you're either going to love it or it's going to wear on you pretty quick. I'm not sure how Dan felt about it, but he did experience it.
Hey, thanks, Jody. First of all, I'll just mention there's some mourning in our apartment this morning. South Africa beat France yesterday in the Rugby World Cup quarterfinals. It was a big upset, 29-28. France was one of the favorites. So it's kind of gloomy here today in our house. And Ireland got knocked out. They're rated the number one team, and they were beat by Argentina, which is crazy. So anyway, we'll keep following that, but that's what I've been following. But getting back to what you said. So last month, my wife Valerie said, Dan, you just got to go take a trip somewhere. We've been together too much. You need to get out and don't work and disconnect and go do something without me. And I said, well, I'm like a little kid. Well, what do? I don't know what to do. And so I thought of you, Jody, because Jody is, as you mentioned, a former park ranger, loves hiking, loves the outdoors. So I called Jody and I said, hey, my wife said I have to go for a long weekend somewhere. Are you in? And as I mentioned, you said yes right away without any dates or any plans, which I loved and I appreciate that. So thanks for that. And then we talked and came up with some ideas. And what we ended up was, you mentioned to me, hey, Zion National Park and Bryce Canyon National Park are up in Utah. It's a great place to hike. It's a great time of year to go there. So we decided and we flew to Las Vegas to meet and spent the night. And we spent the next few days driving and talking and hiking and learning. And it was fantastic. And so the first moral of the story is, I think I just want to tell everyone is when someone calls and they say, hey, are you up for this? If you can do everything in your power to say yes, it's a big deal because you have an opportunity to give, and that was great. So I appreciate that. And the other thing, I'll tell you, getting away, changing environments is such a healthy thing. And you don't know it while you're doing it because you're in a new environment, you're in a new place, you're trying to figure stuff out, you don't have your normal routine. But when you get back home, you just feel so much more refreshed, getting out of that routine. And so when I came home, I was, you inspired me. I took a shot at hiking Long's Peak. A couple days later, I failed to get to the summit because my legs said, we'll get you up there, but we're not going to get you down. And I decided I didn't want to be stranded. So maybe I'll take another shot at that another time. And then I just think the time to chat and think and talk about our businesses and talk about how we're getting things done. It was great. And I think a lot of us don't have enough unstructured time to have those moments. And so if you are right now, you're kind of in a rut, that you have the routine, you're just don't have that energy level, go ahead and just find a cheap ticket somewhere, go somewhere. You don't have to hike. You can go stay somewhere. You can go to the beach. You can go to the mountains. Just change your environment, change your routines, go hang out with people that you don't hang out with normally. And it's going to give you a little boost. It'll make you think differently about things. And that's just natural. Because when you get out of your own routine and your own world and go somewhere else, you just get more creative and recharge.
And there are so many good things about the trip. One of them that I'm going to touch on is hiking is not that different for me. I do it all the time, but going to a place I don't typically go, that makes a difference. And then, we were in the north end of Zion National Park, which was new to me. And we hiked up Taylor Creek to this canyon, and we get up there and Dan said, hey, I want to try something that I just never do. And I hear there's benefit. Let's just sit quiet for 10 minutes and just try to not think of anything. And so we separated, and I went back up the canyon. Dan sat on a log. I went and laid down on a rock and came back, and Dan said, well, how did you do? And I said, well, it was okay until I got distracted by a squirrel. And he said, oh, a squirrel in your brain? I'm like, no, literally a squirrel came and distracted me. So I still think that was funny, but that was kind of a different exercise to just sit in the middle of the desert and just try and think about nothing, which I was unsuccessful at.
And so was I. This meditation ain't easy, but it was a good place to try it and practice it. And the thing I like, Jody, you did when we're hiking was stopping and noticing little things, rock formations where trees were growing out of, doing your 1 minute nature video. And I think that's something else we got to learn more how to do is appreciate little things and being in that moment. And just, you see a squirrel or you see this and just taking a moment and looking at it and appreciating it, because we're just so busy today and so distracted. Things come in and out. We just don't take time to say, wow, that's a nice thing. I'm creating a little memory for myself right now.
Well, and that's why at the top of the show, I said, Dan has now experienced hiking with a park ranger, which you either love or it wears on you, because I realize I can be difficult to hike too. If you like to get from point A to point B, I'm usually not your guy. Although I can move fast, I stop a lot to look at stuff, leaves and trees and bugs and patterns in the dirt and rocks. And it just doesn't stop. I was going to say it doesn't stop, but it always stops. That's part of the issue.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And you slow down. You're not and it took me, it wasn't until the third day that I wasn't like in a hurry. Like I was like, you know what? We're just going to stroll here and enjoy what we're seeing. Cause I'm a pretty goal oriented guy. And so whenever I do something, it's like, okay, when are we going to be done? So we can move on to the next thing. That's the polar opposite of what we were trying to do. And it took me, I think, like I said, the third day, when we were in Bryce, I said, okay, I'm not in a hurry to get anywhere. I'm just going to walk slowly, enjoy the view, take some pictures, and think about things and not think about how soon we're going to be done. And I think that's something else we're kind of victims of. When is this going to be done? And sometimes that's not the goal. The goal is be in the moment, which is extremely hard to do.
It certainly can be. And although Dan and I did not talk about this, I actually felt that Bryce was a little different. It was just like a meander. Even though we knew what trails we were doing and where we were going, we did make a couple of decisions along the way. Hey, let's change path, course, and do this trail. And we just enjoyed it. We looked at rocks, formations, and talked about them and whatnot. There is one thing I want to share. On the audio version of this podcast, you may not get a lot of benefit. On the YouTube version of this, I think you're going to enjoy it. Dan and I stayed one night in Vegas when we got there, and that's where we met. And we went to see the Las Vegas Golden Knights play the Colorado Avalanche. Really good game. Vegas is a fabulous place to see a hockey game. Then the night before we flew out, we stayed in Vegas again, and we did the Fremont experience. And I already know I'm going to have trouble with this word because I always do, but Dan saw a place, a guy doing caricatures. There we go. Closest I've come yet. Nice. And so we stopped and had one done, which is a really awkward experience because you're sitting there mostly still, and this guy keeps looking at you. And I felt like he was smirking at us a little bit, Dan. and then people will come by, and one couple watched us the entire time. And other people will come by and they'll take pictures. Sometimes they'll laugh and you don't know, well, are they laughing because this is ridiculous? I don't know what they see. But anyway, here is the final version of our caricature. And you can see, I just look like I'm having a good time waiting for whatever's next. And Dan is clearly up to something.
Yeah, something is going down and I know what it is. And Jody, you better prepare.
Yeah, and I just have no clue what was going on. And notice Dan and I, that we're on day 5, having not shaved, and he must have saw something here because he drew a mustache on Dan, which is perhaps my favorite part. And my daughter saw this and said, "It looks like Mr. Dan's up to something."
Yeah, she's very perceptive.
Yeah, perceptive. So one of my favorite parts of this whole trip was Dan and I were on a trail in Bryce Canyon, And we hit this one spot that, as wonderful as Bryce is, I was like, Dan, this is perhaps the best spot I have seen in Bryce. And we slowed down and we took pictures, and then we sat down and recorded an episode of the Jody Mayberry show and just talked about where we were and what we were doing. And I think that that's always special when you're spending a whole day outside, and then you realize, oh, this spot there's something different about this spot. And it just is the whole concept of being outdoors to refresh and get new ideas and talk things through. It always leaves me looking forward to getting back to work. When Dan and I left on that trip, I was feeling a little overwhelmed. There's too much work. I'm too far behind. I need more help. Couple days in, I didn't think about any of that. It didn't matter.
Yep.
And then I was actually looking forward to getting back to work
Yep.
by the time we flew home.
Yeah, that's right. And there's something about walking and talking. We talked about some ideas from some keynote speeches, and you taught me some new technology you're using. And so a great exchange. So this is also a best practice. You don't have to go to the desert or even leave. The next one-on-one you have with one of your direct reports or peer, go walk. Have your one-on-one while you're walking. Either you're walking your facility, or maybe you're just going for a walk in the park. It's funny when you get out of an office and you're more dynamic. You're more creative, more open-minded, and it just changes the dynamic. So once again, you don't have to leave for a long weekend and go out to Utah in the desert to benefit from this. Go take a walk next time you have a meeting with someone, and I think you're going to see a big difference in the dynamic of how that conversation goes.
I realize, as Dan tells us, that that's like a park ranger trick that I just hadn't even thought of. That so many times as a park ranger, our meetings are while we're out on the trail doing something, because no park ranger wants to be in the office, and you get to where you don't realize that's something special. So you talk business, park business, as you're going for a walk or cutting down a tree or lighting up a burn pile or whatever. And perhaps we just need more of that in the general workplace, where meetings are walking meetings, or when you're out doing something. It's something I didn't realize was special as a park ranger, but I think could make a big difference.
Agreed. So we're going to challenge everyone. Go do that next week and see what happens.
Yes, take your next meeting as a walking meeting. And also, let me say, if you want to fly to Las Vegas and go to a Golden Knights game, or perhaps rent a car and visit the parks Dan and I did, you should probably call Magical Vacation Planner, because if Dan planned your trip, you're going to end up in a Motel 6 in Cedar City, which you might like, but you might not.
Yeah, and I'll guarantee you, MVP won't send you there, so you're going to be in much better hands, safer hands going with them than Dan Cockerell Travel Agency.
Yeah, that's right. You can reach Magical Vacation Planner at 407-442-0257 and let them know that you do not want the Dan Cockerell itinerary. All right, Dan. Well, I had a great time hiking with you in the desert. I look forward to next time. I was looking forward to showing you Valley of Fire, but when I saw the temperature, I am not disappointed that we skipped that.
It's well named.
Well named, yes. It is. Yeah, you could just call it the oven, given how hot it was in that little town.
That's right.
Yeah. All right. Thank you so much, Dan. It was great traveling with you. And thank you for listening to Come Rain or Shine.